From the Yucatan, from Mexico, 1999. The Boy, the Rake, and the Seaweed. A very brown boy with a very red rake gathers black alga marina from the border of a glacier-green sea. As a hot, white sun beads down and bleaches bits of my canvas. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to show 201, coming to you live from New England, from the shores of southern Rhode Island. This is your poet, illuminator, and guiding spirit in the poetosphere, Colin Goedecke, a voice here and elsewhere for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Last week's bicentennial broadcast, number 200, was about wandering and wanderlust, the joys of being a now and then wanderer, for the sheer joy and serendipity of it, the liberating feeling of it when we're free floating, and that upwelling that can overcome us, the burning desire to venture forth, to explore other parts of the world, places, things, and people. One's new, different, and intriguing. How wandering can happen, and wanderlust can be satisfied, not only literally, but also inside ourselves. The incredible geographies, the terra incognitas of our minds, our spirits, hearts, consciousness. This week, we're heading south. The settings, feelings, and pulls and pleasures of places and people in and ideas and stories about southern climes, ones we travel to, maybe live in now or have in the past, maybe wonder about or well remember. Wherever in the world they are, from the American South to South America, the southern tip of Africa, southeast of Cape Town, to the south of France, the South Pole to the South Pacific Sea Islands. And wherever we are, including our homes, the pleasure many, me included, get from a good southern exposure. Well, on the heels of one southern exposure I had just now, I had a jaunt I just returned from down to Asheville, North Carolina, where spring is unfolding gently and lyrically, led by large plumes of flowering pear trees, bright fountains of forsythia, and that vivid new green grass. So, I've crafted a show of cultural commentary, poetry, quotes, anecdotes, and inquiry around this south-facing theme, and a selection of sharings from various listeners, followers, and friends I invited thoughts from. So, let's head farther south together, and further south, and see what we experience, what we discover. And let's begin. As it warms up, I'll have a sip of water. It's getting warm in here. As I think about all this. But let's head south together and begin on an island off the coast of South Carolina, where I also spent in the past many, many wonderful times, indelible times with dear friends. Kiowa Island, May 1997. Kiowa. Sunset pools pink and pale in the blue-tided marsh. A shooting star descends, a green, luminous messenger passing through the darkening veil. And overhead, a comet in cold and ancient plumage shakes its silvered tail across the southern sky. Kiowa. Paul Blackburn, Journal, April 19, The Southern Tier. I look out the window in upstate New York, see the Mediterranean stretching out below me down the rocky hillside at Faro, 3 years, 2 months, 14 days earlier, 8:25 a.m. Rosemary gone back to sleep, pink and white. I stand at the living room window drinking coffee, open the doors to the balcony. Warmth beginning, though I wrap my hands around the cup, count fishing boats in the sun glare, moving shoreward now slowly or sitting there motionless on the flat sea. A fat blue arm stretches out from the coast, ripples where wind and currents show muscle below the blue skin of sea, stretched out below me. The coffee's cold toward the end of the cup. I go back to the kitchen for more hot, put orange in bathrobe pocket, reach for knife, return to the balcony with the fresh cup where the flat blue sea fills my eye and the sun glare stretches out below me. The southern tier. The maple outside the window warms in the early sun. Red buds at the ends of branches commence their slow bursting. Green soon. Joan moves her legs against mine in the hall, goes down to start my egg. Carlos thumps the lower stairs. We move. All our farewells already prepared inside us. All our deaths we carry inside us, double-yoked, the fragile toughness of the shell. It makes sustenance possible, makes love possible. As the red buds break against the sung light, possible green, as legs move against legs, possible softnesses. The soft boiled egg is ready now. Now we eat. Thank you. Paul Blackburn. Journal, April 19, The Southern Tier, from his selected poems. New to me, the poem and the poet. Well, here are some quotes, various kinds, I thought were interesting for us. Eugene Walter, from The Untidy Pilgrim. Summer in the Deep South is not only a season, a climate, it's a dimension. Floating in it, one must be either proud or submerged. William Faulkner, great Southern writer, novelist. Everyone in the South has no time for reading because they are all too busy writing. I never heard that before, but I like that when I came across it. Yana de Leon said, I barely said 5 words to you. What indication could you possibly have that I'm a Yankee? Well, we could start with the words, what indication? Someone from south of the Mason-Dixon would have said, who the hell are you calling a Yankee? Then we would have fought. Okay. Pat Conroy, he's written some wonderful books, actually down in the Carolinas, South Carolina in particular, I believe, where I spent time. Pat Conroy, C-O-N-R-O-Y. Beach, this is from Beach Music. Carolina Beach Music, Dupre said, coming up on the porch, the holiest sound on earth. Lovely. How about this? Also, he said, walking the streets of Charleston in the late afternoons of August was like walking through gauze or inhaling damaged silk. Yeah. John Green from Looking for Alaska. You can say a lot of bad things about Alabama, but you can't say that Alabamans, as a people, are duly afraid of deep fryers. Yeah, okay. And then this one sort of broadens it out. This is Susan Sontag from The Volcano Lover. Every culture has its Southerners, people who work as little as they can, preferring to dance, drink, sing, brawl, kill their unfaithful spouses, who have livelier gestures, more lustrous eyes, more colorful garments, more fancifully decorated vehicles, a wonderful sense of rhythm and charm. Unambitious, no. Lazy, ignorant, superstitious, uninhibited people, never on time, conspicuously poor. How could it be otherwise, say the Northerners, who for all their poverty and squalor lead enviable lives. Envied, that is, by work-driven, sensually inhibited, less corruptly governed Northerners. We are superior to them, say the Northerners, clearly superior. We do not shirk our duties or tell lies. As a matter of course, we work hard. We are punctual. We keep reliable accounts. But they have more fun than we do. They caution themselves as people do who know they are part of a superior culture. We mustn't let ourselves go, mustn't descend to the level of the jungle, street, bush, bog, hills, outback, take your pick. For if you start dancing on tables, fanning yourself, feeling sleepy when you pick up a book, developing a sense of rhythm, making love whenever you feel like it, then you know the South has got you. About that. I love that quote. Thank you, Susan Sontag, for that. Excellent. Well, I wanted to include a geographic spread as much as I could of poets, not just the American South, but other parts, southern parts of the world, including South America. And who could I not choose but Pablo Neruda? The poetryfoundation.org have a little note about him, which I thought was interesting, and then I have a poem to read of his for us. He lived from 1904 to 1973. Neruda is one of the most influential and widely read 20th century poets of the Americas. No writer of world renown is perhaps so little known to North Americans as Chilean poet Pablo Neruda, observed New York Times Book Review critic Selden Rodman. Among contemporary readers in the United States, he's largely remembered for his odes and love poems. He was born Ricardo Eliezer Neftali Reyes y Basoalto. About that. Neruda adopted the pseudonym under which he would become famous while still in his early teens. He grew up in Temuco in the backwoods of southern Chile. Among his teachers was the poet Gabriela Mistral, who would be a Nobel laureate years before Neruda, reported Manuel Duran and Marjorie Saphir in Earth Tones, the Poetry of Neruda. Almost inconceivable that two such gifted poets should find each other in such an unlikely spot. Mistral recognized the young Neftali's talent and encouraged it by giving the boy books and the support he lacked at home. While in Santiago, Neruda completed one of his most critically acclaimed and original works, the cycle of love poems titled 20 Poemas de Amor y una Canción Desesperada, published in English translation as 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair. I have several copies of that. You might have that book yourself. The work quickly marked Neruda as an important Chilean poet. And there's more about him here, but I'm just going to go all the way to the very end of the article about him. He returned to Chile from exile in 1953 and said the other people, Duran and Saphir, spent the last 20 years of his life producing, quote, some of the finest love poetry in 100 love sonnets and parts of Extravagaria and La Bacarola. Produced nature poetry that continued the movement toward close examination, almost still shots of every aspect of the external world. In the odes were Neruda's aesthetic choices. In his speech upon receiving the Nobel Prize, he noted that, quote, there arises an insight which the poet must learn through other people. There is no insurmountable solitude. All paths lead to the same goal, to convey to others what we are. Pablo Neruda. So, I'll read you from his 100 love sonnets, Sonetos de Amor. This is sonnet 81. I won't read it in Spanish as well. I'll just read you the translation. And now you're mine. Rest with your dream in my dream. Love and pain and work should all sleep now. The night turns on its invisible wheels, and you are pure beside me as a sleeping ember. No one else, love, will sleep in my dreams. You will go. We will go together over the waters of time. No one else will travel through the shadows with me. Only you, ever green, ever sun, ever moon. Your hands have already opened their delicate fists and let their soft drifting signs drop away. Your eyes closed like two gray wings, and I move after, following the folding water you carry, that carries me away. The night, the world, the wind spin out their destiny. Without you, I am your dream, only that, and that is all. Gracias, Neruda. Beautiful. Yes. Well, from Wikipedia, southernmost settlements. I was curious what they actually are. I think I knew one maybe, but unlike the northern hemisphere, where a large number of major cities, including London, Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, Vienna, Prague, and Budapest, are all located north of the 45th North Parallel, it's the one south of that, 45th, are the small and sparsely populated regions of southern Patagonia in South America, the Falkland Islands, and the southernmost tip of New Zealand. Well, it turns out there are three contending cities, sparring about it all the time. Punta Arenas, Sandy Point, the oldest and largest city in southern Patagonia, at the Strait of Magellan. Ushuaia, the capital of the Argentine province of Tierra del Fuego. And Puerto Williams, located on Isla Navarino, is the southernmost town in the world on the southern shore of the Beagle Channel, the capital of the Antarctica Chilena province. So there you know. If you didn't know that, now you do. Which made me somehow think of Mark Strand, sort of in places hot and remote and jungly. This is a poem of his called What to Think Of. Think of the jungle, the green steam rising. It is yours. You are the prince of Paraguay. Your minions kneel deep in the shade of giant leaves while you drive by, benevolent as gold. They kiss the air that moments before swept over your skin and rise only after you've passed. Think of yourself almost a god, your hair on fire, the bellows of your heart pumping. Think of the bats rushing out of their caves like a dark wind to greet you, of the vast nocturnal cities of lightning bugs floating down from Minas Gerais, of the coral snakes, of the crimson birds with emerald beaks, of the tons and tons of morpho butterflies filling the air like the cold confetti of paradise. Thank you, Mark Strand. What to think of. And here's one of mine. I think about the untamed nature of some south-lying places on the map that I've experienced. And this is one of mine from Tulum, from Mexico, February 2006. Staying on the coast, and the jungle was right behind and all the way, as far as you could imagine, behind where I was in a small house there by the sea. This is Casa Laura, Laura's house. We float above a sea of almond trees, whose broad leaves burn ember red, above a sea of endless wind and turquoise water shimmering with fish and sun, above reefs and ancient civilizations ground to white powder for our descending feet, above the first floor of the first morning light, above the jungle's roots, the jaguar's paws, and the other life we have for a winter's time left behind. How about this? Going from the land to the sky and to the heavens. This is from space.com. On the Southern Cross, crux constellation stars and mythology. The Southern Cross has long been a celestial landmark for intrepid explorers and travelers south of the equator. It is an asterism made up of the most visible stars in the constellation Crux. This is all new to me, by the way, and I sort of wanted to say asterisk, but it's an asterism. The iconic group of stars is visible mainly from the southern hemisphere because of its orientation in the night sky. The Southern Cross has historically served as an essential navigational guide. Two of its major stars form a line that points to the South Pole. The Southern Cross is also featured in the flags of several southern hemisphere countries. It isn't the entire region of the sky that makes up Crux, just the 4 or 5 stars that make its iconic cross shape. That's what makes it an asterism. So maybe you want to go look up more things about that sometime. Maybe I should have worn, it's getting very warm, maybe I should have, I'm fooling of course, worn my bathing suit, which I'll speak about later. A bathing suit. Well, I do have questions for you, for all of us, about the South, and things southern and southerly, that I'd love to ask you to think about. Are you a southerner of any kind, from somewhere, from some country or region in the world, like the Southern Hemisphere, South America, the American South, Southeast Asia, the South Pacific? And if so, how does it feel to be one, distinct from people born or living in northerly places? How does it shape or distinguish you particularly, as far as you're concerned? From your voice to your tastes, your way of thinking or relating, your sense of life and society. What are your best or most interesting experiences traveling to or through some southern landscape? From the geography to the personalities there, the food to the way of speaking. What's the southernmost place or point you've ever been to? And what took you there? And what took place there? What great stories have you read, or films have you seen, or songs have you heard? One set in or about the South, or calling the South to mind somehow, that were particularly affecting, maybe revealing, educating you about some aspect of a Southern culture that you didn't know. How about customs? Are there any Southern customs you've appreciated and adopted that weren't originally yours? What would you say is the greatest contrast between being a Northerner versus being a Southerner, or vice versa? I'm curious about that. I'd love to hear any of your answers to these from tonight. You would send me at any point as you mull on them. Is there one or more Southern characters who left a big impression on you over the years, either in person or seen from afar? And what was that impression? It might have been a friend or a teacher, maybe a love, somebody in the movies. Are you a seeker or lover of having Southern exposure wherever you live or go to, regardless of season? That quality and fullness of sunlight? If so, what about that is so important to you? I know it is to me. Are you a snowbird? I know a few right now. They're snowbirding down in Florida. And if you are, how has that escaping south in winter to warmth gone for you, for your body, for your spirit? Are you heading south anytime soon? Literally or dreamingly? Well, I have some sharings here to continue with. This is from a regular listener, B, a native New Englander who has traveled to various Souths over the decades. She said this: when I go south, I start relaxing, slowing down. I start thinking less, needing less clothes. I want to take in all the sun and the warmth. I seek more taste, more color. And then said this later: why don't you take us down tonight, on the broadcast, take us down tonight to the southern parts of our bodies, our solar plexus, our hips, the sway. Well, thank you, B, for that. I'm liking that, and thinking also places like our feet that can dance, can feel the ground and the rhythm, and the small of our back where a dance partner would bring their hand. Well, this got me thinking metaphorically about the southern places of our bodies and of our beings, including the geography of our minds. And is there a south and a north on another not scientific but metaphysical or etheric level? I'm just begun thinking about that more anyway. And a terroir that's more watery, more fluid, like the literal southern hemisphere. Well, you might like to ponder that, as I am. And just to help you ponder that, from Wikipedia on the southern hemisphere, just a line or two about it. The southern hemisphere is the half of Earth that is south of the equator. It contains all or parts of 5 continents, the whole of Antarctica, the whole of Australia, about 90% of South America, about 1/3 of Africa, and some islands off the continental mainland of Asia, and 4 oceans: the whole Southern Ocean, the majority of the Indian Ocean, the South Atlantic Ocean, and the South Pacific Ocean, as well as New Zealand and most of the Pacific Islands in Oceania. Its surface is almost 81% water, compared with almost 61% in the Northern Hemisphere, and it contains 32, almost 33%, almost a third of Earth's land. So, how about that? This next is from Anthony, a Northerner who has been living in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm not really a fan of the South, so difficult to expand on love for it, but I was on the southernmost tip of the United States, at South Point on the lower tip of the big island of Hawaii. Ka'la'i. Stunning. Thank you, Anthony. And I have a short clip from April, who began life in Georgia. I had some questions where I spoke to her today. So let me just cue that up for us.
Yes, understandably. Well, was there anything you would say call a virtue or virtuousness, or a thing you appreciated at roots? If some of the roots were not your desired ones, that were there any tendrils or things that of lovely southernness that you feel you embody even today?
Southern hospitality, has its reputation. I do think there's an element of that is there.
Well, you're one of the most hospitable spirits I know.
Oh, well, that's weird.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah. So, I think there's that side of it where Southerners can be, again, this is like such a mixed bag for me to say, can be very warm and welcoming, which, again, in contrast to the South being very not open and not welcoming and polarizing when we talk about politics and what's kind of happening in our country.
So it's selective, in other words.
It feels like it. I used to I used to make jokes, and again, this is my own personal trauma of what I've seen, and I haven't lived all over the South, so it's hard for me to talk about. I moved back to the South, which I thought I would never do. I'm barely trying to make my way after losing Brad, so that wasn't really an option. So, but it's been good, and people here have been very warm and welcoming. I live in a very liberal area, so that's helpful, and I've gotten dialed in with kind of an artsy crowd that's all very liberal. Like one of my good friends here, her husband is a lawyer. He ran for governor. He's Democratic. So had that. So it's been positive here, but I know there's pockets, but I haven't gotten exposed to that a whole lot.
Yes.
So.
Well, I'm glad you're making a good life. It happens to be in the South at the moment, and for the foreseeable future, right? That you are there and you feel good about the environment you've landed in there.
Colin, you're breaking up a little. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I said it's good that you've landed in, even though you are in the South and you hadn't thought of that, you've landed in a good setting with good people. It's feeling right for you. It just happens to be back in the South.
Yes, I know. Interestingly. Hey, Colin, hold on 1 second.
Thank you, April. Okay, well, yes, I'm sure, right? There's, it's like anywhere, even in the same town. There are pockets of an entirely different experiences, personalities, often countries, regions, which we could say are Southern, but would be all these generalizations don't always help us, but they exist. I guess they'll always exist. The stereotypes. Well, I would say that all of my own experiences in the South have been comfortable, enjoyable, memorable, whether in the American South, the South of France, or the South of Italy, Germany, other parts of the world, and most often on or near the sea, in my case. But I felt that I was thinking about this before, I said a certain common thread of, if I had to say what those threads were, easygoingness, gentleness, friendliness, often graciousness, however humble or modest a person's circumstances, sometimes even in an inverse ratio. And like others, I'm drawn to the heat and color and sounds, the taste, the faces, the nuances, native to a given Southern place. Partly imprinted, for me, I would say the way I observe it is culturally, partly historically, some environmentally, organically, and yes, seasoned by the climate, the weather, and the weather patterns. Yeah. Well, on a note of gentility, Southern gentility, here's a poem that I composed because it came to mind out on the South Fork of Long Island back in May of 2001. I was at a lawn party there, and this is a poem for a tree, for friends, for their beautiful tree. that I couldn't help beholding, your linden tree. A bountiful hoop skirt that cascades down around the low-cut lawn, a glossy ballroom floor of grass where white irises confederate like courtly old colonels, and blushing young river birches flutter in the shade, waiting for guests to breeze through the gate and join the sunlit garden party. Oh, I haven't read that in a long time. Happy to share that with you and myself. Here's an article. I forgot to write down where it's from, but if you're interested, we can find it, because the title is "It's a Matter of Honor: Why Southerners Are More Polite." Where an individual's reputation is highly valuable. To test this, researchers conducted an experiment. Psychologists Dov Cohen and Richard Nisbet believe they have an answer. If somebody insults you and you fail to respond to the slight, you might start to look like the kind of person who can be taken advantage of. Conversely, if somebody were to insult you and you sock them in the jaw, you would have successfully defended your honor, and people might think twice before behaving poorly around you. The same applies to protecting one's personal property or defending a significant other against unwanted attention. As a consequence, good manners are a must. If you live in a culture of honor, a certain amount of respect is expected, even from strangers. And then there was this interesting article. Why Northerners think all Southerners have one accent. A small North Carolina island shows how different the Southern accent can be. The tiny island of Ocracoke, off the coast of North Carolina, is unimpeachably Southern, the most remote of the Outer Banks islands, founded by Sir Walter Raleigh, and the point of capture for Blackbeard the pirate. Favorite destination, vacation destination throughout the South, sort of a Nantucket for those below the Mason-Dixon line. And yet, if you were to speak to an Ocracokean, you wouldn't necessarily know it by their accent. It was settled by the Europeans very early, isolated from other parts of the South, has a singularly strange accent, some parts which do not sound Southern at all. The most classic accent example in Ocracoke is appropriately nautical, high tide. They do not say ha tod, as the rest of the South would. Instead, they say hoi toid. It's a weird remnant from colonial days, trapped in amber. How about that? And they talk about other pockets of things, as I just mentioned it myself a little earlier. There are micro-accents and dialects everywhere. And the South is divided in peculiar ways. And they interview all these linguists, and so it's quite a quilt. Yeah. So I won't read the rest because I want to move along. Yeah. Oh, except the end. The end, they said, about the high tide, the high tide, you might also hear that in some place, they say, like Southwest England, like Cornwall and Devon. Even then, you might have to hop in some kind of time machine to hear anything like the Ocracoke accent. I'd like to hear that, actually. Maybe I can find that somewhere, maybe on YouTube or something. How about Southern phrases you won't hear anywhere else? Yeah, in the American South, that is. Bless your heart. Have you heard that? In the movies, no one's ever said it to me. Maybe April said it to me a few times in a good way, because it could be done many different ways. It can be deployed sincerely, as I've heard it. But if you're hearing "bless your heart" in the South, it probably has an edge to it. Almost always accompanied by a good-natured, perhaps slightly exasperated shake of the head. It can express empathy or judgment, or can be said in place of a person's true feelings. Full as a tick. If you had a big Southern lunch complete with cornbread, collard greens, and pecan pie, you're definitely full as a tick. How about fixin' to? I'm fixin' to tell you that this phrase is a Southern sweet tea. When you're fixin' to do something, it's going to happen, but you also may decide to take your sweet time. When you're in the South, over yonder is a distant direction, any direction, over yonder. I reckon I can replace any number of phrases such as I guess, I suppose, I think, and I imagine. It's a quintessential Southern phrase said by friends and family on porches and in rocking chairs all across the South. How about this one? A rooster one day and a feather duster the next. Our creative way of saying that you shouldn't crow like a rooster about your wealth and belonging today because it could all disappear tomorrow. Living in high cotton. It refers to success because the plentiful cotton grew high, promised a good crop, meant a good profit. And the last one for now, that's cattywampus. While this phrase may sound made up, it's simply our multisyllabic manner of saying something is askew. This 19th century phrase was once used to refer to some fierce imaginary beast. How about that? Okay, just doing a little editing on the fly to keep us in good time. Well, I mentioned bathing suit earlier. Then I ought to be in one as it gets warmer. Well, the summer produces a kind of southern effect, doesn't it? Well, this is from the Côte d'Azur, France, October 2003, where I love to go for the landscape, the Mediterranean, the air, the colors, the flavors, the energy, and sometimes seeing good friends. Well, this is an experience I had around a bathing suit. I was able to find just what I wanted, just the style, but back in time style, more like 30s style. So this is maillot de bain. Splashing round the streets of the French Riviera, searching for a maillot de bain, classic and blue, to slip into a certain style with, the kind of suit les hommes bronzés would display in the Baie des Anges for Lartigue to photograph, a way to swim back in time and timelessness. Yes. Georgia O'Keeffe on the shimmering beauty of the Southwest, the American Southwest. Of course, you would say, maybe agree, she's regarded as America's first great female artist. Well, she left New York and moved to the exotic expanse of the Southwest to live a solitary life. At the peak of her career, she did that. Her best friend, Anita Politzer, later wrote, "Fame still does not seem to be as meaningful or real to her as the mesas of New Mexico or the petals of a white rose." And here she is in her own words from this is from Book of Letters, Lovingly, Georgia. That's the title of that. She channels the expansive awe of the Southwest sky. This was 1916. "Tonight I walked into the sunset to mail some letters, the whole sky, and there's so much of it out here, was just blazing, and gray-blue clouds were riding all through the holiness of it, and the ugly little buildings and windmills looked great against it. The eastern sky was all gray-blue, bunches of clouds, different kinds of clouds, sticking around everywhere, and the whole thing lit up, first in one place, then in another, with flashes of lightning, sometimes just sheet lightning, and sometimes sheet lightning with a sharp, bright zigzag flashing across it. I walked out, past the last house, past the locust tree, and sat on the fence for a long time looking, just looking at the lightning. You see, there was nothing but sky and flat prairie land that seems more like the ocean than anything else I know. There was a wonderful moon. Well, I just sat there and had a great time all by myself. Not even many night noises, just the wind. It's absurd the way I love this country. I'm loving the plains more than ever, it seems, and the sky. Anita, you have never seen sky. It is wonderful." Thank you, Georgia O'Keeffe. Well, I too found the American Southwest beautiful, colorful, memorable. This is one of mine from Santa Fe, New Mexico, September 1999. The title is Santa Fe. "The rainbows come in assorted colors here, and the pots of gold included at sunset each day, filling the paintbrush, the yucca and the cactus, gilding the sides of leaping trout and the broad backs of black bears, veining the ripe red mesas and washing through the undulating oak-scrubbed hills." Another poem from Mexico, from the Yucatan Peninsula, 1999. Today's palette. So we have here the colors. Azul celeste is azure. Tiza y lavanda, chalk and lavender. Apizzarado, slate-colored. Verde veneciano, Venetian green. And tremesino, summer wheat. Today's palette. For the sky, azul celeste. The clouds, tiza y lavanda. For the low horizon, apizzarado. The deep sea, indigo. The shallows, verde veneciano. And for the sand, trigo tremesino. Yes. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about literature, but I'm going to sort of just mention some books, actually. I'll pull through a few of these things for us. But notable works. There was a James Agee film project, and they conducted a poll of book editors, publishers, scholars, and reviewers. Which of the thousands of Southern prose works published during the past century should be considered the most remarkable works of modern Southern literature? Well, here's some. Maybe you know them. I've read them. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, James Agee's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, that was 1941, William Faulkner, The Sound and the Fury, Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, Erskine Caldwell, Tobacco Road, 1932, Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind, 1936, Ernest Gaines' Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, 1971. Also interesting from the Southern Review of Books, it was Southern Poets on Place. So they talked to them, and I thought they had some interesting comments to make. How does the South's sense of place impact your work? And Ada Limon said, the connectedness to the land is one of my favorite things about Kentucky. There's a sense of a rootedness, a legacy of place that is both expansive and inspiring. From the very first year I moved here, the overwhelming green, the horse pastures, the rolling hills, the Red River Gorge, the landscape made its way into my poems. Yeah. And Adam Clay, the South is a place filled with juxtapositions, and at least for me, juxtaposition is the fundamental building block of poetry. There's also a collection you might enjoy, Poems of the American South, an anthology. There are many out there, but I thought this one was especially good. A one-of-a-kind collection about the American South ranges over 4 centuries of its dramatic history and the arc of the South, from slave songs to Confederate hymns to Civil War ballads, from Reconstruction turmoil to the agrarian movement to the dazzling poetry of the New South. Quite vibrant. Yeah, invigorating. And I also wanted to mention, as we go along, some films. Quintessential Southern movies. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Big Fish is another one. Bull Durham, 1988. Cape Fear, the original, 1962, with Gregory Peck, Robert Mitchum, Polly Bergen. Coal Miner's Daughter, 1980, based on Loretta Lynn's life. Cold Mountain, 2003, based on the book. The Civil War soldier, wounded, deserts his post to find the woman he loves. Driving Miss Daisy, 1989, about an elderly Jewish woman played by Jessica Tandy and her African-American chauffeur, played by Morgan Freeman, who develop a relationship over the years in the American South. Forrest Gump, of course, 1994. Fried Green Tomatoes, 1991. And Gone with the Wind, 1939, about Scarlett O'Hara, the spoiled heroine who goes through the tribulations of the American Civil War while falling in love with rough-and-tumble Rhett Butler. One of my favorites, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Hysterical. George Clooney's in that year. That was in 2000. Coen Brothers adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey. Steel Magnolias, 1989. And The Help, a very interesting, very provocative, 2011, based on the book by Catherine Stockett. Tells of an aspiring writer reckoning between her life in segregated Jackson, Mississippi, and what she knows is right. And To Kill a Mockingbird, 1962. What a film that is. Seen that a few times. Walk the Line tells the real-life story of Johnny Cash and his rise from a small-town boy in Arkansas to his move to Memphis in connection with June Carter. Well, you may have a favorite, maybe one of those, maybe something else. I was going to tell you about some songs, but I don't think we're going to have time for that, so we'll just skip along. Of course, I was going to mention Ray Charles and George on My Mind. Had to mention that one, for sure. Okay, so we'll save that for another time, maybe. Okay. I hope you're enjoying the show as we go along. Well, it's a poem I've read for different shows a couple of times for different reasons, and it is absolutely apropos because it's about one of the most quintessential Southern fellows, gentlemen, true gentlemen of the old school that I knew. He's not alive now. He's alive in my memory, in my molecules, my feeling places. His name was Billy Bryan. He was a doctor and the father of one of my dearest friends who's down in Colombia, where April has moved to. But Tom's been there his whole life, very happily there, and his wife and children grown up and grandkids, all about the South. But this was a farewell poem to him after he passed away, for him, in honor of him and for his family. For Billy Bryan, Flying South, November 2007. You're flying south now, farther south than you ever dreamed of going, traveling australly and astrally at the speed of infinite bliss, far beyond time and a century of earthly delights. From a young fellow dallying and dancing, to a gentle man husbanding and fathering, to a wise figure doctoring and postdoctorally granddaddying, riding throughout a tide of graciousness and gregariousness that made you a small giant and gave you a glow of famousness in the hearts of friends and family, who see you flying now into the arms of the universe, and taking as you go a turn through the Crab Nebula for the sentimental part of your journey, a sweet sip from the Milky Way, and a hat off to the heavenly ladies from Virgo to Cassiopeia, to your great and guiding southern star, and to the sun that will shine on your face forever. Love that man. Love him still. Brings a tear. Billy Bryan. I'm going to point you to this next poem so I can continue on, but it's a beautiful poem. It's a longer poem by David White, What I Must Tell Myself. You know, he uses nature as the metaphor of about that great journey south that every one of us makes once in a lifetime. So if you don't know that poem, I've read it. I've read it often. Yeah. Save that. I would like to read, coming soon, momentarily, into our last things, but here's a piece I composed for a large cultural contribution to the 2018 Winter Olympic Games that were that year in South Korea, on the border of North Korea and South. And this was dedicated to all the people of Korea, of both Koreas. And the title of it is Norths and Souths. And the entire body of work that I created for that was visual, written, spoken, some of it scored. Has been put into, as far as I understand it, a museum there. They were very, very happy to have this all. So this is Norths and Souths for the people of Korea. Throughout history, countries and kingdoms, dynasties and dominions, from the Americas to Asia, Europe to Britannia, have lost their civility, descended sadly into hostilities. Throughout life, then and now, men and women have, too, at times left their inner poles, their true norths and souths, lost that precious harmony, entered blindly into inhumanities. As Mr. Lincoln sagely said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Rightly so. From houses of nations and cultures to houses of communities and self, yours and mine, or stand well or worthily, until they hold themselves, until we hold ourselves close to the deeper heartfulness of mankind, our human kindness, and the benevolent geography of nature. Yes. All right. Coming into our last musings and sharings now for this week and this time and this south-facing show. This is from just to lead in, from an article, 6 Pacific Islander Poets You Should Know. This is just one. William Nu'utupu Giles is an Afakasi Samoan writer and arts educator from Honolulu, Hawaii. His poems dig for the political seeds and personal stories His work connects contemporary poetry with the oral traditions of Polynesian genealogy and crosses oceans of immigrant identity, colonization, representation, and masculinity. And here's one, and I felt very fitting. Prescribed fire. As some of the tallest trees in the world, redwoods can grow to over 350 feet above the earth, yet their roots, on average, only travel 10 feet into it. In isolation, it should be physically impossible for them to stand. However, these enormous trees do not grow in isolation. Their roots, each only a single inch thick, wraps around the roots of its neighbors. A stubborn foundation of brown fingers clasps an underground stand and grows. My family is a group of redwoods that sought God instead of ground. When my mother immigrated to the United States from Samoa, she taught none of her children how to speak our native tongue. Now, 26 years later, I cannot feel the hands of the land I come from. How do you stand when your roots have been burned away? Today I am a tree toppling over, a man cut off at the knees, stuck between a loved language lost and a sky still out of reach. And that is the true legacy of World War II in the Pacific, a generation of Islander and Asian immigrants who learned that their foreign accents and different skin could mean your family in internment camps, learned their place in this society could only be bought with blood and uniform. They learned their citizenship papers would only be traded for their severed tongues. It is true that the branches of a tree may spread no wider than its roots, but when parent countries are just another word for poverty, when you are made to choose between putting your children in culture or clothing, which blood would you want? This is how redwoods fall. They forget the only reason they are able to stand and defy common logic is how well they hold one another. In Hawaii, an immigrant mecca where so many of us try to stand with a lost past, we have old weeping banyan trees who also came from across that sea. These banyans start from seeds that are blown to other canopies, and without pity or regard for past, they create their own way to the ground, sprouting aerial roots that crawl to the earth and make a home wherever they find it. In Polynesia, we have always learned from the earth around us, so now I do not lament my lack of roots. Instead, I grow them myself. So every day I am a wind-blown seed, I am, quote, foreign accents and different skin. Every day I fall toward the earth and I'm reborn in dirt. I am blood in uniform and severed tongue. Every day I am the blood I want. Every day I look around, hold on tight to those I love, and I grow into an extended family tree. Thank you, William Nu Utupu Giles. Beautiful. New to me. Poem of mine from the South Fork of Long Island, from Sagaponack, New York, summer 1998, July. Perhaps Provence. Pedaling behind you and your South of France chapeau, a wide-brimmed beehive buzzing with beauty, your pale linens blousing in the breeze, pedaling past the purple and gold-swallowed meadow, the chartreuse-stained barn, the soon-to-be sunflowered field of another August, past fountains of blue hydrangea and flocks of rose hips and tiger lilies, down to the absinthe ocean. Perhaps Provence certainly felt that way that day. And last for now, well, we often, I'd say many of us associate Southern cultures with a slower pace, less stress, more savoring, mañana, where many things can wait. So there's much to be said for that, by the way. Slower living, thinking, being. Well, this last one is from the Yucatan, from Mexico, 1999. Todo bien, all is well. Today you take a siesta in the shade, surrounded by a sun-glazed sea. Your thoughts drift on the endless waves, on the passing clouds. Like shells, your ears catch the music of the surf, and the palms rustling like loose pages in the wind. You've forgotten the date, and indefinitely the hour. Todo bien. Thank you again, friends, for leaning in here, for thinking and feeling in, for sharing this southern excursion. I'd welcome hearing your experience of the show on Heading South, or how others you've taken in have resonated. And I invite you to freely share it out, or the whole playlist. If you greatly enjoyed this broadcast, I'd also welcome any contribution you might like to make in return. All donations help support my work on these programs that I shape lovingly and carefully and happily to illuminate you and others. And if you are making a gift, you can do that by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal to the same email. Or you can simply mail a check to me to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Or contribute with ease through the Donate tab at thepoetorialist.com. Is there some theme you'd like to see a future show on? Let me know. Colin at thepoetisphere.com. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube, currently on the Floating Poetry playlist there, ultimately on other leading platforms. And some of you know these broadcasts are coming to you through the Poetisphere, the oasis of possibility that I'm guiding, which you can explore as a visitor or join as a subscriber. I'd welcome you either way. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to see what it's about, see how it speaks to your outer and inner self, and get a sense of our growing community of possibilitarians, kindred spirits, good people. To make joining more attractive, I've made month and year-long subscriptions available between now and April 5th of this year of 2024. And you'll see the codes right on the site from the Join tab. The Poetisphere awaits your discovery. There's also a recently released album I mentioned last time on Spotify and every streaming platform that you might enjoy. It's called Oases of Regenesis, O-A-S-E-S, O-A-S-E-S, Oases, the plural, opening to places of greater aliveness. Have a listen. Also, there's a soon-to-be-published podcast I did with the Soul Goddess group in England on creativity. That's releasing March 28th, I am told. I'll let you know later about that next time around. Meanwhile, I hope you'll lean in here soon again. Until then, dear listeners, a nod and a courtly bow to all things of good note due south, wonderfully or soulfully southern, or beautifully southerly, and to taking yourself there in body or by book, film, imagination, or memory, or savoring, maybe even more so, living in the South, or being a Southerner by birth, or one at heart, if you are. And let us spend more time in the southern places of ourselves, in the warmer places of our humanity. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.